herself of it, and that's perfectly her right. Senator Ludlam, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. I've got a couple of questions about Australia's overseas development assistance budget. Can we bring forward some folk who can speak about that?
Yes, Senator. Yes, Senator.
Great. Okay. Firstly, what I would like to know, by way of overview, I guess, is whether the department quantifies in some way its overall assistance in any given financial year. So we have a financial quantum of overseas development aid, but I'm talking in terms of outcomes. So, for example, is it possible to tell us how many children are sent to school thanks to Australia's aid? Are there any metrics such as that you can bring to us?
Senator, we have a performance of Australian aid report that we put out, I think it was put out in January of this year, that talks about our performance against the program, including some indicators like you've talked about.
Yep.
So the answer would be yes, we do have some of that information.
Great. So, for example, I don't have a copy of that report in front of me, but for example, is there an overall number of people assisted through the aid program to any degree of approximation?
Senator, I haven't got a copy in front of me, but we certainly have had indicators like that in the past, and they vary. So, you know, it could be the number of children that go to school, for example. And Mr Gilling might be able to help me on this version and whether that's incorporated.
Great.
Senator James Gilling, I'm the First Assistant Secretary for Contracting and Aid Management Division. The Performance of Australian Aid report, which Mr MacDonald mentions, works through a whole range of different programs mentioning different outcomes. It does not aggregate across the entire program.
Sorry, just give me that language again. How do you put that?
So the Performance of Australian Aid report reports at 3 different levels. Yep. It reports at the total level against the government's 10 strategic targets.
Yep.
So that's the whole aid program, the whole 3.8. Mm-hmm. Then the next level is at country level. So 26 different country programs each year produce an annual report. And that annual report talks about different areas of impact, which could indeed be children at school, it could be kilometres of roads, it could be numbers of health centres.
That's what I'm thinking, yeah.
And then we move down to the project level. We talk about what individual projects have achieved, but the report itself does not attempt to aggregate across the programme the numbers of kids or kilometres of roads.
Okay, so theoretically it would be possible to do that, but somebody else would need to kind of do that manually, as it were.
Yes, that would be possible, Senator.
Okay, so there's not really any way then of telling across the whole ODA portfolio, longitudinally year to year, how to judge, you know, the numbers of these kind of indicators, whether it be health clinics or kids in schools or roads or whatever.
So no, at the aggregate level of the whole program, reporting is against the government's 10 strategic targets.
Okay.
But we also have a performance framework we have a performance framework across any of our programs.
And what does that tell us?
That's aggregated up every year and is assessed through our independent evaluation committee. So that's about the performance of the program overall against a set of ratings, which Mr Gilling can also elaborate on if you wish.
Yeah, it's probably not a bad idea. Just step through at a high level how that's done, if you could.
Okay, well, as I say, at the highest level, the government set 10 strategic targets, which was set as part of the 2014 document Making Performance Count. So if you'd like, Senator, I can table them or I can talk through them.
I reckon let's table them just because the committee's going to be a little short of time and other senators have questions. Mm-hmm. Thank you, I appreciate that.
Just on that, Senator, there is one thing I would refer you to in that report, which I've now got a copy of, which is page 103, which is the report by the statement by the Independent Evaluation Committee Chair, Jim Adams, who was a Vice President of the World Bank.
Yep.
And he notes that, or he judges that Australia's aid performance management system is amongst the global best practice. And I think that's their independent assessment of that performance framework.
All right, thank you. So page 102 of Budget Paper 2 tells us that the government has decided to make a $303.3 million saving from the overseas development aid portfolio. There's a certain amount of ambiguity, I guess, as to how much of a cut that represents, but I'd like you to just spell it out and work through it with us now. What percentage reduction that would have been against the 2019-20 and 2020-21 forward estimates, as compared to what the budget would have been had ODA kept pace with the CPI, which was government policy as recently as February?
Thank you, Senator. As we've mentioned at previous estimates, we provided forecasts for the aid budget. Prior to this measure, the aid budget in 2019-20 was forecast to increase to $4.110 billion.
Right.
Following the reduction of $100 million, it will remain at $4.010 billion. The aid budget was then forecast to increase to $4.213 billion.
Yep.
And following this saving measure, it will remain at $4.010 billion. So it's the impact of the government's decision to maintain the level of ODA for those 2 years delivers those two amounts of $100 million and $200 million. So
100 million in the second out year and 200 million in the third out year.
Correct.
And no changes to this forthcoming financial year.
Correct, Senator. The aid budget increase is $84 million in 17-18 to $3.912 billion.
All right. So that brings Australia's overseas development aid, I think, to the lowest level since, as a proportion of gross national income.
It's the lowest
ever.
It's the lowest GNI.
Yeah.
At 0.22.
That's a disgrace.
But it's not the lowest in terms of volume of the program.
You mean in terms of absolute?
Yeah. So the program is as Mr. Wood said, 3.912 billion next financial year, and then increases to 4.010 the following year. So in terms of volume of money, it's not the lowest, but in terms of GNI, it's the lowest since records were kept in 1974, I think.
Yeah, what an absolute disgrace that is. So this, I guess, goes back to the questions that I led with at the outset. Is it going to be possible to provide any kind of estimate against the various benchmarks and reporting mechanisms that you were outlining a short time ago as to how many fewer people our aid program will be assisting compared to what was projected as recently as February? I don't know who wants to take that one. How many fewer kids in schools, how many fewer clinics, how many fewer kilometres of road are we looking at?
Senator, at the moment our program is $3.828 billion, so it will be increasing. So we'll be increasing our assistance over the forward estimates in terms of our funding and therefore our contribution. So it's not a reduction over.
It's a $300 million cut based on what was in the last budget paper.
Yeah, it's a
so let's not play around with words.
No, it's a $300 million saving, I agree, but I'm saying for next financial year, the program is growing from where it is today, so therefore it will be assisting more people as it will the following year.
So in January, January 2014, this is a quote, the Minister said from 2014-15, the $5 billion aid budget will grow each year in line with the CPI. And that policy appears to have been junked. This might be one for you, Senator Brandis. Why is that the case?
Well, Senator, Mr McDonald has explained the position. Portfolios have been asked to find savings to bring the budget back into balance. This portfolio is not exempt from that.
Defence appears to be.
But if I may finish without being interrupted, please, Senator.
Mm-hmm.
But as Mr McDonald has explained, the funding will increase over the period of the forward estimates beyond 2017-18, right?
Yeah, so the budget will increase from what it is today, 3.828 billion to over the forward estimates to 4.010.
I think the Minister described it as a freeze.
No, the Minister, and I'll have to check the wording, but the budget increases, I think, by at least CPI or a little more than CPI next financial year and then the following year. And then there's a pause for 2 years, I think is the term, and then it starts to grow again.
Okay, so in terms of the pause, 2019-20 and 2020-21, those years are safely the other side of the next federal election. So if there's a change of government, I guess it's potential that, in fact, these cuts wouldn't come into effect.
Well, Senator...
That's something of an incentive, isn't it, Senator Brandis?
Well, Senator, governments in Australia, as you know, are elected for 3-year terms.
Just good to know.
Could I just note, Senator, as well, the measure in Budget Paper 2 also notes that indexation will recommence in 2021.
Unless you change your minds again. Like, on what basis of confidence should we take what's written in this budget paper when what you've been saying since 2014 turned out not to be worth the paper it was printed on? Why should we believe a single thing that this government says about what may or may not happen in 2021?
Well, Senator Ludlam, the budget, as you know, projects expenditure over a 4-year period across the forward estimates.
It does.
But the parliamentary term is less than 4 years, so plainly across within every set of forward estimates, there will be the possibility of a change of government at an election. So I don't quite understand your point, Senator. Are you criticising the fact that we project over the forward estimates? Because that's what you seem to be doing.
I'm criticising a fact that the statement that the Minister made in 2014 managed to be completely worthless, and that's why I'm wondering why we should bother paying any attention to your projections for 2021.
Budgets are prepared one budget at a time, Senator, as you know, depending on the fiscal circumstances and policy priorities of the time.
Indeed. Can we go to the specific programs that will be affected as a result of these cuts? There's $300 million that would have been put to work, most of it in our region, that now won't. So what will the impacts be, and be as specific as you're able, please?
Senator, as I said earlier, the budget is increasing next financial year and the following financial year, and we program on the budgets that we have going forward. So there's no reductions of our existing programs. It's just we've now got a set of projections into the forward estimates, so an increase of $84 million next financial year, followed by an increase, I think, of 98 million the following year. So that's what we're projecting into the pipeline of programs that we'll be building for the next over the next forward estimates. So there's no reduction, because the envelope of funding at the moment is funding programs that are already in place.
So you've managed to make a $300 million cut sound as though it won't affect anybody at all. I mean, what would have been done with this money?
Senator, I wasn't saying it wouldn't affect anybody.
Yeah, I'm trying.
You were saying what were we going to cut?
Who will it affect? I mean, we can play around with words if you like. Who would be affected?
Senator, the development assistance budget, as you know, supports developing countries in relation to the priorities we've set both under the Australian government policy and also the needs and priorities of the developing countries. All I'm saying is when we forecast out to our pipeline of programs going forward, we take account of what that funding envelope is going forward. So I can't be more specific. We've got over 1,000 programs that we have in place at the moment.
I suspect I'm about to get the wind up from the chair.
And I suppose, Senator Ludlam, the other point to be borne in mind is that you can't just look at a funding decision in a budget within the portfolio or within the broad area of a particular portfolio. I mean, you say, where is the $300 million going? The $300 million is going elsewhere because the government has other priorities too.
Yeah, I haven't asked that. So thank you for answering a question that I hadn't yet asked.
I thought that's what you were getting at, Senator.
No, I want to know who has been affected and who won't be funded.
Well, the people who will be affected will be Australians who will be the beneficiaries of $300 million being spent in other areas of the budget which wouldn't otherwise be available.
You're like joint strike fighters.
Or schools funding.
My final question, and then I'll come back a little bit later in the afternoon, is I'm presuming you understand that if you freeze a particular budget line item, it then begins to decline in real terms. So it's effectively our foreign aid budget in those out years, 2019 to 21, will actually be declining in real terms.
Yes, Senator, I understand that.
Yeah.
Is your question, I think.
Just wanted to make it absolutely crystal clear. Thank you, Chair. I'll come back a bit later.
Just before we finish on this, Senator
Sure.
referred to, I think you asked me about the language the Foreign Minister used to describe this.
Oh, yes,
so
I did.
just want to quote that from her media release.
Thanks.
Where she says the aid budget will increase to $4.01 billion in 18-19 and be maintained at that level for the following 2 years.
She didn't use the word freeze. All right, I'll withdraw
No,
that.
she did not use the word freeze. The word was and
Thanks
be
for the
maintained.
clarification. Thanks, Chair.
Thank